Okay, everybody, I wanted to go ahead and introduce myself. My name is Christy Thompson. I am the Sales and Marketing Director here at BIS Technology Group. And just a few housekeeping things before we get started. If you have any questions, we're going to keep everybody muted until the end, but you can type them into the chat box and we can respond then, maybe even interrupt the presentation and have them answer it then as well. It is being recorded, so afterward we're going to send out the recordings. And just wanted to say thank you so much for coming out today. We're going to be discussing the 8 landmines leaders should avoid when they're trying to build their team. And Phillip Long is going to be the speaker today. He is a technologist and entrepreneur who specializes in providing technology solutions and security consulting to businesses along the Gulf Coast. He's been in the IT industry for over 15 years, has 600 plus clients from Gulfport to Gulf Breeze, is the owner of over 5 businesses, and is a certified information systems security professional. And for those of y'all that don't know, that means that it's backed by the Department of Defense. So I'm going to pass it over to Phillip, and he's going to go ahead and introduce our special guest today.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much, Christy. And also, I'd like to introduce Susan ROLLWAGEN, and we're very excited to have her. Susan she works for a company. She's out of Pensacola, and it's Pepperbox Solutions. And she's worked with a lot of different teams over the past 30 years. And most of her work over the past 20 years has been focused on internal consultations, focused on helping bridge gaps between organizational teams, which I really like. Whenever Susan and I first met, she talked about being an alignment specialist, and really, I think that defines in my mind what she does. She does a lot to help businesses work. In today's world, we have a lot of different generations all intermixing, and a lot of really different behaviors and a lot of different, attitudes, and the human mind and behaviors are very complex, and she has a way to kind of get that sorted out and put into to rational thoughts and ways that we can actually help to design teams to work more closely together. So Susan, welcome, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you very, very much, Phillip. I appreciate that.
Yeah, and I want to make note that Susan has worked with our company. We drink the Kool-Aid as well. We have issues like every other company, and she has been instrumental in helping us transition some of the things that we were trying to implement and couldn't get implemented internally in a fashion that was, in a timely fashion. She came in and she was instrumental in helping us get alignment between our leadership team and really got us to where we have what we call the BIS way, which is a complete manual for how we run the company. And again, I not only do I endorse her, but I appreciate her as well, because she has been very helpful. And today's format, just so we kind of all have understanding on what we're going to talk about and what we're going to do today, is we're going to talk about some myths about team building, basically some wives' tales or some myths, and how some common language that's often used, how it can be abused or it can be wrong. And this is things that Susan has found throughout her career, and she's helped companies with. So I want to go ahead and get started here. And so number one, we're going to talk about gathering your team regularly for bonding events over food, or fun, food, and alcohol. So Susan, I see the problem with too much alcohol, but at BIS, we really love offering fun and food. As a matter of fact, we do that at least once a month, minimum. And our employees, they really seem to love it when we do it. Aren't those effective ways of saying thanks and showing appreciation to our team?
Yes, they are effective ways. And I think, and I have seen it in your team, they just really love that. I think the first time I was in your office, they had a potluck going, and they were, it just does excite people. So as we talk about these different landmines, my purpose is not to blow a hole in what you're doing. But what I've noticed is over the years, we go out online or we read these volumes of information that's out there about building our teams, and many times we pick up those key pieces and steps and principles, but we miss the fine print or the cautions that come along with them. And so when Christy and I first started talking about that, we decided to emphasize those cautions that are within those good things. And so what you are offering to your team are great when you do these events, but what I have seen is people interpret bonding as team building, but bonding doesn't always improve your results. And so that by itself, these things really don't get you where you want to go. So getting together for food and fun can be a great reward, but know what you're rewarding. And part of my reason for thinking about this one is that I've watched over my years millions of dollars invoiced as team building, when 90% of that expense went on fancy locations and liquor. And so if you have a lot of money, there's nothing wrong with being extravagant, because extravagance can show appreciation, but I've also seen it backfire where people think, well, if they can afford this, why aren't they paying us more? So watch that, know the temperature of your team, but extravagance doesn't always yield return. So get return on that investment by using your time and money to combine that food and fun with things like maybe using a little bit of that time to facilitate solutions to roadblocks that are frustrating your team, or using some of that time in that event to generate new ideas to move the team toward greater success. And target specific returns on that event investment, and balance that fun with some purpose. So Christy has put on the screen some principles that you can use later to kind of remind you that the extreme can hurt you. Things about motivate your folks at this fun time toward repeating the performances that got them the success that you're there to celebrate, or talk about what you want repeated. Stats are really a great way to motivate people forward, reminding them of their great stats. Also, reminding them of when it felt good during their journey of getting to that success that you're celebrating. Give folks a chance to thank each other for what they contributed during that journey. That's also a great opportunity. And when you recognize individual successes that were part of that team success, be sure that you're linking that individual's contributions back to the team success, because sometimes somebody was doing grunt work that really was powerful and important, but they don't get that thrill of being on that top rung. So make your fun. Also, the last bullet on that slide was make your fun that you have at an event fun for everybody, diverse enough so that the whole team enjoys it. I'm always sad when I'm invited to events where a clique in the group really got to do their favorite thing and the rest of them are just kind of watching and standing around on the fringes. So think about those events and let them be that whole thing that encourages everybody to repeat that performance.
Yeah, that's really good. And I mean, it really gets down to intentionality. And I think too often people stop at the ground floor. They never actually think about all the, I have a life insurance guy, and he always uses the term whenever an investment or whatever really solves a lot of problems, or it does things. He says it lights up a lot of boxes. So ultimately, you need to think about all the floors or all the boxes that you may light up by doing that gathering, instead of just having it. You're not getting enough bang for the buck. You're spending the money, you're spending the time, you're coordinating the event, you're doing all that you do. You want to make sure that you light up all the boxes, as my friend might say. That's good stuff. Yeah. Well, you kind of touched on this one, Susan. On the next one, it talks about, structure your team's events to reward competition. Now, you know, individual competition, you know, you hear all kind of things today. And of course, with our culture the way it is, you know, everybody needs a medal kind of thing. And I sit often with a friend of mine, Daniel Nance, who owns a couple of Chick-fil-A's, and, you know, always trying to balance the, you know, and maybe it's a generational thing. I'm certain it's a generational thing. And yeah, I'm of the generation. It's real easy to speak highly and reward people of things whenever they're doing well. But what if they're not? Let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, that is very true. When people aren't doing as well, it is hard to recognize the things that they are doing, and many times the good that they're adding. And many times, some of those people that aren't at the top of the class per se, they are contributing when their attitude is right and their behaviors are right, even if they are behind the rest of the team in their productivity or something. And in a few minutes, when we talk about values, I want to try to remember to come back to this, because there is a really good illustration about what kind of effort that you make when you see those that aren't quite at that top of the competition ladder.
Mm-hmm.
But go ahead. You can ask.
No, I was agreeing, and you know, this one really. Really, to me, because again, I'm of the generation where competition is a good thing, and it's something that is really, you know, and I guess I'm of that type of personality that, you know, the best way to get me to give it my all is tell me I can't do it, or tell me that so and so is
going to beat me. I learned that fast about you, Philip.
That's right. But some people are turned off by that. They think, you know, they're totally against that type of mentality.
Some people are, and let me talk to you about why I brought this up and why I think it's so important to balance it. When I was in the 90s, this will age me, but when at the end of the 90s, I was a hiring manager, and I could not find many A students that were top people in their graduating classes that were willing to share knowledge and give credit. And I began to notice this in young supervisors that I wanted to promote and things like this. Pretty soon, it was about the time my daughter was entering college, and I realized about that time, more universities were beginning to put group study, group work into their programs. And now almost every university program now has group work. I don't think I was the only leader at that time, at that turn of the century, that realized these people, we have been telling them to compete since kindergarten, and now they don't know how to share. And so when that individual recognition that is so wonderful when you compete, we have to give that individual recognition without waiting for the competition. So I think when we feed that recognition, we don't need the competition as much. But competition is fun for people, and it can be exciting. So we can use it, but I think balancing it with cooperation and collaboration in our overall practices is really the smarter way to go. Making sure that strong individual results have good measures helps make people feel complete and like they are quietly competing all the time if they need competition, but also helps those people that do not need competition or are turned off by competition, as you mentioned, Philip. Good, strong, accurate individual measures in whatever you're doing will help those people feel like they have a way to shine without feeling like they need to knock somebody down, which is what is in their head with competition. Now, events is where I framed this landmine. And so when you have events, that's a great time for competition, but because it's exciting and it's kind of fun. But what I would suggest is that you put people in groups to compete. Have these three people compete against these three people, and then it's not so much one person gets to win and walks away with all the glory, but everybody is working, and you're teaching collaboration because those three people in each group have to collaborate. one other thing I want to share about this principle of events is because we do a lot of activities sometimes when we're teaching. And what I have noticed is many times the activity, and it's the last bullet on this slide, the activities lose effectiveness when they're not debriefed wisely. So people need to understand, what was that about? It wasn't about not dropping a ball or, you know, some crazy skis you were trying to get across the sand in. It has an application back to work. But many times they are not debriefed wisely. And I just want to say to anybody that's on the phone, if you have an activity you want to do, or you are trying to teach something at a team thing and you're not used to debriefing, please pick up the phone and call, because all it takes is a few minutes to really kind of walk through and flesh that out, how you can facilitate that yourself. But I see that's a missed piece of the value that we try to substitute that competition excitement in, but we can get excited different ways and effectively emphasize that cooperation too.
Yeah, that's really good stuff. And sounds like the theme so far, what I'm seeing is the planning, is the Franklin Covey says, start with the end in the beginning. So you really want to work backwards and, you know, think about what you're trying to accomplish. You know, what do they, you know, you say what you're going to do, you do it, and then you say what you did. Basically, kind of that process of the reiteration of the value of what you're doing. It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, that is an excellent observation, Philip. That is exactly for events with team building. That is exactly what you should do. Of course, there's also an aspect of team building that's practice. What are you doing every day? But you're so right about events. Start at the end.
All right. Also, we're going to talk a little bit about treating all the team members the same. And ultimately, we all hear it isn't fair, but let's talk about that being a landmine as far as what that means in treating all members the same.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting. If you dig a little into psychology, you see that that word fairness is so funny today, because a huge part of us as humans, we think fairness is treating everybody the same. And yet another huge part of us think that fairness is treating everyone as an individual and the way that individual needs it. And so that really leaves fairness kind of fuzzy for a lot of us, but yeah, that is kind of the mantra. But in truth, we as leaders know we're different, and we know those differences are a huge strength to our teams. Different talents, experiences, skills, different values, even the different ways our brains work, and so many combinations of uniquenesses that contribute to our teams. But then we hear things like this and our bells go off. You're blaming me for not treating you all the same, and we don't know, we stop, we get nervous about that. So I think the big thing in our teams, if you can help your people create a culture of self-awareness, that really is a great first step. I've recently discovered Tasha Urich's work on self-awareness, and I think it's an interesting statistic she shares. She says her statistics reveal that 95% of people believe they are self-aware, but the real number, according to the way she defines it, is closer to 12 or 15%. She says that means that on a good day, about 80% of people are lying about themselves to themselves. We're tricking ourselves. So let me tell you how she defines self-awareness. She defines it as external and internal. External is how other people perceive you, which is just as important as the internal, which is how knowing your own values, knowing your personality strengths and weaknesses. And so those are two very different scales, and they aren't always the same. So it's important to be looking at both of those and creating that culture where your people are looking at both of those. So on the slide, I put some principles that kind of can help round that idea out of everybody getting to know themselves and knowing what their best self is. One of them is building a trust priority, building a priority that we are all building trust, extending trust, repairing trust when it's broken, because we all know that we can move faster, get faster results when we're trusting within our team. Also, self-assessments, lots of self-assessments out there today, and they are a tool to help us with self-awareness, but many times we don't take them the next step and apply them to our whole team or to an important aspect of our team so that they can get that well-oiled understanding between themselves instead of just within themselves. When I say address perception as the reality it is, all of us have been in that spot where somebody says, well, this is how you came across, and we want to defend ourselves. And inside, we are denying that we came across that way. So the more we can create that culture of, and the next bullet goes with this too, getting comfortable feedback and understanding that even though that may not have been our intent, it was the perception we gave, and it needs to be addressed just as much as if the fact, was obvious to us. And I think part of making that kind of culture successfully is learning how to ask questions of each other in a respectful way. We are not the same. We do not hear things the same. We do not interpret things the same. So we need to learn how to be respectful of each other in that. Also, professional coaching is something I think is new in our world. And the difference, I do want to say, not performance coaching, because we all do that. And many times new leaders or something like that need performance coaching for a while. But professional coaching is more looking inside and pulling out those pieces of yourself that you may not even be aware of, or putting them together. So some of our people may need that. I don't think everybody we should invest in that way, but I think it's a new thing that we're not all taking advantage of as much when in this vein. So I thought I'd mention it.
Yeah, that's really good stuff. And you could do that in like using the Myers-Briggs or something, and then it's funny that that question respectfully, I'm building a house right now, and how like you have a landing at the top of the stairway, or really my stairs go up to a landing and they turn and go up to the second floor. And my builder is I've gotten to be really good friends with him and all, and he's a good old boy from Alabama, and he's been doing it a long time. And how you respectfully ask about, because we were wondering whether we should sand all of those on the landing, which is basically some 6-inch planks that all get tongue and grooved together. And he's like, you want to sand it after you install it. And at first I didn't understand why, so I had to respectfully ask him, why you want to do that, because and my point in that is that I think in that respectfully asking, it needs to come from a source of, I'm trying to obtain knowledge. I'm not questioning your authority per se. I want to understand. Help me understand. I think that's a good analogy to kind of work there. All right.
And especially with people that are different than you. You're right.
Yeah, exactly. And so number 4, we want to adopt a great list of team values, right? Team values are something that is critical, right? Every book you read about building a company, it's going to talk about, you want to build your core values, and you want to publish your core values and all that. How could that be a landmine?
Yeah, that one was tricky, and but I decided to put it in anyway because values are critical. I didn't let Christy mark this one out at the top of the slide though, because you do need great values. But I think there is a place where we can get off balance with it, so I put it in here. Values are only valuable if everyone knows exactly what they mean in the context of the work they do. Employees should know what their expected behaviors are and what how those behaviors align to the values in your company. For instance, if you took the value of initiative, does that mean that you expect employees to offer solutions and to grow their skills and take the initiative to develop their careers? Or does it mean that the ends justify the means and they should get the sale through any method that works? Those are two very different behaviors. And yet I've seen initiative interpreted both of those ways. So if you don't have just a few values, not a long list that people, this is too much, I can't be that perfect, but a few values that clearly describe your team's most critical conduct, then these are the results. You could be spending far too much time disciplining and monitoring your employees, which is usually wasted effort on adults, instead of measuring and coaching them. And I want to just define a couple of those terms. By discipline, the difference between discipline and coaching is that adults really usually don't change because of discipline. They feel that it makes them feel like a child. They change from the action of coaching them, because that is helping an adult and helping them understand why. And many times, monitoring and measuring, to leaders, they sound the same. But many times when you're the recipient of that, monitoring feels like stalking, where measurements feel like personal objectives and a hope for improvement and recognition, but it's in like an individual competition. They're competing with themselves. So what I have found is when we have good measures, it kind of allows us to know how we should be helping that person that is or is not making good results. And I have a matrix there that I got from Threads Culture that I thought was really great. When you look up the left side of the matrix, you see that values go from low to high, and across the bottom, results go from low results to the right to high results. And I want to share first in that bottom left-hand corner, if you have employees that their behaviors are not aligned to your values and they have poor results, those folks, if you can't get them out of that box soon and in at least some other direction, those are folks that probably are going to hurt your company as long as they stay in that box, and you can probably bank on that. The people right above those they have the values, their behavior is aligned with your values, but their results are still poor, their performance can probably be coached. And many times that's what you find, because they want to do the right thing. They're trying to do the right thing in so many areas, and especially in their behaviors and values. I want to look next at the bottom right-hand corner, where these are great performers. Man, they really put the money on the board, but their behavior does not align with your values. And these are tough decisions. Those are the times where you really have to decide, do I want to keep the money more than I want to keep, my values? And those are tough. So you're always working most of your people up to that top right corner. And I just thought this was a cool visual to look at your values and look at those measures that your people are putting out and seeing who's aligning there and who's not, and do we have the right values, and are they clear enough to everybody about how they should be behaving? And that's why I put that one. So ensuring your values are understood as the most critical behaviors to all and that all employees are accountable to use them consistently really can help your business be more successful.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense there. So let's talk about encourage spontaneous communication like sharp wit and sarcasm. So on this particular slide here, I guess I can see how this could get, out of hand, basically because, if somebody's really sharp-witted and they know how to use sarcasm, to them, it can be absolutely hilarious. And I'll tell, these are my friends here, so I'll be honest, my son and I both, we both enjoy, and I can't remember the movie, but on a group text, we're talking about all getting together for Easter. And I'll be more transparent than I probably should be, but it's okay. So we're all getting together, and my son comes up with, we ought to do a roast for everyone. And, basically, do some funny things about the mannerisms or the attitude or the looks or whatever, while we're together as a family. We thought that would be fun. Well, of course, my niece, she feels that was that would be painful and hurt someone. So it sounds to me, and and I guess it could, but it really depends upon the person. So this sounds like an area where you got to be careful.
That's right. That's absolutely true. And, you know, unfortunately, that first word in that is encourage. And when leaders allow something, people think it's encouraged. So just as you said, to some of us it's funny, and to others of us it's hurtful. I recently heard some stats that really brought this home to me. The stats said that creating a team of respectful communicators, leaders and team members that are purposely respectful, results in team leaders who have been measured to perform at least 12% higher than those who don't make that effort to communicate respectfully. So
please say
we
that
all know there.
I'd like to hear that one more time for my own sake.
Yeah, they said that creating a team of respectful communicators, those teams have been measured to perform at least 12% higher than those who did not craft and prioritize this behavior of being respectful to each other in their communication. So not only will it increase your productivity, but it also teaches them the next steps of how to communicate in those new audiences with executives and all those other people as they continue in their career. But what also has been a little bit of an eye-opener to me, because just like you, I enjoy being witty once in a while. It is fun, but it can get us into trouble. Some of the stats I've put on the slide, and they all came from Center for, these stats came at the bottom of the slide. The resource is the Center for Creative Leadership. But the second bullet says, when we feel disrespected, our performance suffers. It really does. We're distracted, we miss information because we're frustrated with or hurt, or, you know, it does. I think this third bullet is really a little scary. When CISSP began to realize that this was a reality, this incivility, that's what the stats called it. This incivility was an issue in their world. They said they estimated that incivility was costing them $12 million a year. Distractions and things like that. And many perpetrators were unaware that they were causing the damage. Yeah. So I thought that, and they said even when people were in the same room with it, even if it wasn't, and you know, lots of us have worlds that are just cube worlds. We hear everything else. So even if you're not the one that's being targeted or the brunt of it, of the roast, it can impact your performance. So it really becomes, these edgy habits can spark feelings of disrespect, which reduce productivity, and it can be dangerous, even though it seems fun and very camaraderie driven in the moment. And that's the danger of it, that undercurrent of it. It feels like we're just having fun, but those other people are getting the barbed wire, as Christy put in that picture.
Both people have to agree that it's fun.
Yeah.
We'll build an app for it, I guess. That may be a way that they could sign off that it would be fun, and then you could have fun with it. And it could actually be team building. But I get it. You got to be really careful, because one person's humor or wit or whatever can be extremely demoralizing or whatever to another. Makes a lot of sense. Good stuff, good stuff. Well, let's talk about using organizational taglines like a mantra in every communication and conversation. Now, that's good marketing, isn't it? I mean, you want to say it so many times that that people hear it. And then another thing is, I mean, even in a lot of books I read, they talk a lot about the the need for as a leader, really you need to say things even if they make fun of you for saying them so often, yada 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 yada, all the things that people hear about the repetitive nature of leadership, or of taglines that are meaningful to the organization. What's your thoughts? How can that be a landmine for us?
Well, I think the landmine comes in only saying the line and not taking the communication further so that everyone understands all the nuances and all the applications of that to them. because we've had to boil those taglines down to a few syllables, a few words, and there's so much meaning behind them. And so that's where the challenge comes. I know some of you have probably been in organizations where this has happened, and where bosses will pay people to say the mission statement, you know, if they catch them in a pop quiz type situation. And that's great, because it does exactly what you're saying, Philip. It gets them to learn that in the repetitive way. But in one of those type organizations, I remember, and I've worked in a couple, where beautiful poster collateral has been made about the mission and all of the direction, and then sent to all of the employees. And one year I started, every time I'd go into somebody's office or cube and see that they had posted, they were serious enough about it to post that poster that they had been given, I started asking them, if we did that, what would it do for you? Or if we did that, what would it do? How would it change the business? Or how would it help your customers? And all year I did that, and no one ever had an answer immediately. I mean, a couple of them said, well, let me think about that. But nobody had it immediately. So my point here is, many times our teams, and of course it depends on what level of the organization your team is on, but many times just knowing the words does not help your team understand how they are driving that part, that objective, that direction. So stretching those marketing dollars that create the catchy language and translate it into the organization's direction, translate that into your team's specific direction. Ask your team, facilitate their input, so you help them uncover what their impact is and connect it to that purpose, to that mantra, and help them find words that they can express. This is what we do to make that happen. And so often people don't understand the link between what they do and what fuels that branding, which is what they literally produce every day.
Yeah. I love it. Yeah, that's really good. Now I'm going to go off script here for just a second, because, you know, like my kids, they were classically educated through the classical model, which is language, logic, and rhetoric. And as a small child, they would teach them tons of these mantras and, you know, these sayings, and for memorization they would sing songs with, I mean, tons of information. If you heard them sing the song, you would be amazed that they know so much, but really they have no connection with the meaning of those words. They just, when you're that age, you can learn rhymes and rhythms very easily, and then later, you know, hopefully they fill in the rhyme and rhythm with meaning. And but in order to do that, in my way of thinking, you've got to get people to think, and you know, and to ask questions about, how would this look in my department, in my role, in, you know, my company or whatever. How would you suggest getting people to flesh out that? Would you do team building sessions where you brainstorm together on a board? I mean, give me some ideas on that.
Well, I do think you're right, and that's why I put that last bullet in there. Facilitating their input is the key. So even if you visually look at their output and have them identify whatever they create in their team, wherever their widgets go, and taking that next step and that next step and connecting those steps to the customer or to what's going on in the market, or whatever that strategy is that your mantra tagline says, and help them literally build those pieces out. And then see what happens when our production is low. What happens when we take too much time for this? What happens to that bottom line? So just literally drawing it out like you do when you're educating, but let them build the education.
Yeah, that's really good. All right, let's talk a little bit about you know, post the organization goals on every cube and meeting agenda to stay focused. You know, that's something that, you know, key performance indexes, and
Mm-hmm.
having the goal to everything needs to really kind of flesh upward into the goal. I do this, and if I do these key performance things, then ultimately we're going to hit our goal. Tell me how that could be used in a way that is could be a landmine for team building.
So your description of that was very much like a business leader. You, in your whole sentence there, Philip, you didn't stop between seeing the connection between the organization goals, and you took it all the way to the individual. And that's what we do as leaders. We see where the individual drives that organization goal. But what I have seen far too often is that person that is doing the job 2 or 3 layers below the executive, they do not see how their piece drives that goal that's on the wall in the break room. They don't and it's just like the mission. There's a gap between that goal and the goals change every year. So it's not like we memorized the mission once 2 years ago when we came. Now the goals change. And also the goals are often written in words that are a language that not all of our employees understand. Not all of us understand finance language, or how to read the market status, or even the customer perception realities. I mean, you get somebody that's in a department that's twice removed from the customer space, and they don't understand all the impacts that the customers get. So helping, when you get goals each year, making sure that you drill those down to your team's goals. It's not good enough to look at the organization goals and think my team gets it. And that's really the same application that we just made with missions, but I see it happen so much with goals because of that executive language that we write goals in. So that one's really a pretty simple one.
Cool. Yeah, that is good stuff, though. So let's talk a little bit about always hold people accountable for following the team's processes. Now, we know every business book you're going to pick up, and you look at E-Myth, and I'm a big fan of E-Myth, and I believe that in order to scale, you've got to have defined processes, and like the 4 stages of a team, and you start off with muscle and feel, and you want to end up with leaving a legacy where basically you're not even needed anymore. Basically, you worked your way out of that job and hopefully onto bigger and better things. And the way that I've always been taught is you do that through processes. That way, you go to I'll use Hardee's because I'll just remember the poster on the wall, and it shows, ISO 9001 or whatever, how dark the biscuit needs to look. So tell me how it could be that, holding people accountable to team's process, how can that be misconstrued?
So I love processes. I really, really do. And because of my blind spot with processes, somebody actually said this quote at the top of the slide to me early in my career. He said, constantly blaming people before checking the processes can bite you in the butt. His name was Sam Smith, and he was a tall, very quiet supervisor that I supported in my first leadership role. But usually when Sam spoke, I needed to think about that. And what he said here is really smart, because I loved my processes so much, I would blame the people immediately without checking my processes. And many times it did bite me. So we need to be careful. Now, I am all for accountability, but I'm going to say, because we can't operate without accountability. But before we get too excited with accountability, we need to me, I have found it's much more helpful when the process is broken and it comes to your attention and you talk to that person, assume that they meant to do the right thing. Many times processes are tweaked or what we would call broken if the customer is needing something unique or something like that. So ask for details around that gap and examine that process has it eroded? Has something changed along the way that has made it not as effective? Or is it just broken? Did the last job aid not get published or something? And after, when you're sure the process is still working and the person didn't have some situation where they needed to step out and make a judgment call, then hold them accountable for following the process. The best scenario is that you create a culture where your people are process evaluators and know what to do when the process does begin to erode. Our world changes too fast to think our processes are always going to hold their shape and be the very same really important piece of our world in the same way all the time. And then once you create that culture, don't shoot the messenger when they escalate a process gap. I do think it's also behooves us as leaders to think about how our processes are created. The last bullet here says, apply to process creation the truth that the people doing the job always know it best. Now, that doesn't mean that the people doing the job always know the best way to do it, but they always know what they did better than you know what they did. So that means that 95% of the time, the people that building the process are not the people that are going to use the process. So, I mean, they don't have time to get out, to step away to build it. So that means those people that are building it have got to get input from those people that are doing the job.
Yeah, if I would have learned that 10 years ago, if I would learn that 10 years ago, I could open up and show everybody my my process folder. I won't do it but I mean, literally, I have a process for everything that at some point 10 years ago, whatever, I wrote them, and I would stay up late and I would write and write and write. And the part that I missed on two levels was, one, really tying in with a person and figuring out what they were doing. And on the second level was really spending a lot of time training them on why I wrote what I wrote. And so I never had buy-in. So I spent literally years of frustration and, you know, God, this is the greatest thing since sliced bread. I put all this thought into it. And I mean, you know, not bragging on myself or anything else. I mean, the processes were never that bad, but it was the approach by which I came upon that process that was so essentially flawed that they never really got implemented, or if they did, they weren't implemented to the fullest. And so that's a good one for me. That hits right at my heart. All right, well, let's talk about team building as a practice and the practice of showing respect for individuals in all interactions. Tell me a little bit about that.
I came across this and I thought it would be a great conclusion for today. It was data where over 20,000 employees around the world were asked, what do you want most from your leader? And being respected, being treated with respect was the most important thing. And it was more important in this, what they learned, it was more important than recognition, than appreciation. It was more wanted by people. Respect was more wanted by people than useful feedback or even opportunities for learning. And then they measured how these people felt about their jobs. Those people that were getting respected felt healthier, more focused. They were more likely to stay in their organization. They were far more engaged. So I think that the bottom line, when you are trying to build a team, if you will filter things through trying to treat your team with respect, you will filter out a lot of these things that are extremes and can get you a little bit off balance. I hope you picked up a few tips on keeping your team engaged as it evolves and avoiding the landmines that can surprise us as we're tiptoeing through the team building tulips.
Yeah, it's really been, I mean, I've learned a lot just going through this, and I even have the slide deck, but you've done a great job of explaining that. And I tell you guys, from a sincere person, and I think, you know, anybody who knows me, you know, I'm a sincere person. I wouldn't intentionally lead anyone wrong. I really do highly recommend you know, the use. I know the return on investment that we have had has been dramatic, and the time savings that we had of trying to get everybody in alignment on what we were trying to get pulled off and why we were getting it pulled off, and even explaining, getting us to focus on certain terms and get us to where we all could agree. Susan has been very instrumental and very well worth the time and the you know, the cost of what that she did. So it always gets down to, we've spent 50 minutes of an unrenewable resource today, which is time, and really we've learned some information. And it's always, what should we do with this information? And there's all kind of statistics talking about, if you don't write it down, it lasts 7 minutes or something, da 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 da. Well, what I have to offer that Susan has so graciously done is a free 1-hour session of team building consultation. And I remember the exact spot. I was on the highway after I'd heard Susan speak at a medical group management association in Pensacola, and she was talking about alignment. And I'm telling you guys, it was absolutely providential. At the time, I was very frustrated in some areas. I was really pushing hard to get some things done, pushing too hard to get things done, as that's my nature. And you know, I called Susan, and she gave me a free, I don't know, maybe an hour, probably was an hour, and she talked to me about some things, and then we did that. And I really would encourage you guys, if you know, if you have a hint of wanting to build a better team, if you do that, you really need to do that. And she's offered this for the first 3 people who contact her on the webinar. If you'll reach out, and then that's got to happen before April 1st. So we got 2 weeks basically to get an email off to her, and her email address is susan@pepperboxsolutions.com. So we'll kind of end the talk on that, and we'll ask any questions. Christy, was there any questions throughout the event? If you have any questions that you'd like, you can put them in the chat box and we will get them answered for you. But Christy, was there any that came in?
Yeah, we had a couple. So one asked, what is a good team building event?
All right, Susan, you're up.
I think a good team building event is totally dependent on what you want your people to walk away from. I will share, though, a fun one that I used to do for teams that didn't work together. Like a team that produced something that another team then had to use, like I produce widgets and you have to use the widgets. Many times there are big walls between those teams. And I used to do something here in Pensacola to take those teams and partner them up on a scavenger hunt at the Naval Air Station Museum. And it was just so cool to be able to give them a bunch of questions. And for months, they would work together great again after that. But think about those ideas of being something creative that people can get together. So I can't really be specific, but really give me a call on things like that. That's just pure sugar for me on a phone call, to be able to use my creativity about a problem somebody has.
Okay, Susan, we had one more. How do you get people on board with processes?
I think help them come up with the advantages that those processes would be in their world. And then as you create it, get their input and take it back to them, and most of the time people don't have the time to be part of the real creative process. But we all know that getting people's buy-in before it's too late to change it is really a part of getting them to go forth and use it. All of us that have created processes know how crushed we are when those processes have to be put to rest and buried. People, we love our processes, so get them and get their buy-in so they fall in love with it to just a degree that you do when you create them.
Yeah, I'll add to that too about processes in general, is doing exactly that, and it takes 3 times longer than a guy like me thinks it should, but it's 10 times more valuable to do it with that buy-in, but also being sure that they understand what the words actually mean. I did that this morning with my Chief Information Officer team that I have, and just talking about what is certain words, what does it mean? Because in every industry there's a plethora of shorthand words that we use to describe something, but I was very surprised that a word that we use often here was misunderstood by one of the guys that's been here probably over 10 years. And think of the not I say damage, but think of the loss of opportunity, we'll put it that way, that him not understanding this one particular word, it's who knows what that has hindered us from moving faster, stronger, better, whatever. And I think really dicing it down and getting in the minute by minute details of a process and making sure that everybody shakes their head. And I even finished with this statement that I've been more since really working with you, Susan, about, now listen guys, here's what I see from this event. I see that we're all in lockstep and that we all understand that X, Y, and Z is the outcome of this meeting, and basically saying, and please, I need you to come to me if that's not the case, because I'm going to proceed on. And I read a book by Jocko Wilkes and somebody else. It's called Extreme Ownership, and I think it's something worth presenting to the team often, is that a lot of times, and this doesn't shirk the responsibilities of leaders, but as leaders we need to be certain that we're telling our team that it's your responsibility as well, that if you don't understand, or if you don't agree, or if you don't you don't have 100% buy-in, I've got to hear you, because whenever you nod your head yes, I'm thinking we're all on the same page. And for me, that has been something that you helped me with a lot, is taking those extra 2 or 3 go backs to make sure, and explaining it and refleshing that out. That's been very helpful, I think, for the overall outcome of what we're trying to accomplish, as well as probably relationships with people, so that we're all on the same page and we've all agreed. And if we get off on the wrong different page, or we feel like we might be, please, let's spend extra time on the front end and get it fixed, so we don't start trudging along, and then ultimately as a leader, you're going to get the blame for them not understanding. We have to take it, but we also have to preach to them that, hey guys, listen, that's probably not the best word, but we have to reiterate to them that, listen guys, we want to, this is what this means to me, and I want to make sure it means that to you before we proceed.
That's right.
Yeah, it's kind of long, but I got it out. Good. Any other questions, Christy?
I don't believe so.
All right. Well, listen, we'd like to thank Susan first and foremost for her time today, and really everybody, because, I said it earlier, time is an unrenewable resource, and I hope this has been beneficial. We encourage all the listeners to please, if you have specific topics, the cool thing about what we get to do at BIS is we get to interface with tons of professional people. Some of you guys on the call now are in your area, are experts, and you would have things to provide to other people. And ultimately, it's the go-giver mentality that we want to be about. So we need to hear what it is that you have questions or you'd like to learn more about, and we'll round up the people, we'll put together the information, we'll get them to present, and then we'll give you a copy of the presentation so that you can use it how it best would suit you. So I'd like to just end by thanking everybody. Thank you, Christy, for the work you did to pull this off, and really the rest of the team that does a lot of things that y'all never even hear about. We do appreciate y'all. All right, so I'm going to call it a day, and thank y'all. It's 2 p.m. We spent 60 minutes. Thank y'all.
Thanks, Philip.
All right, see ya.